Lead us not into temptation. You know, it was about a year ago that I started a study on the Lord's Prayer. I thought that would be a good thing to do. And I had no idea that a year later I wouldn't even be done. We're getting close, but not quite. And actually, the phrase that made me want to study the Lord's Prayer is the one that is today. Lead us not into temptation. I don't understand why our Father would lead us into temptation and then deliver us from evil. Do you? I dreaded this section, but I have good news for you. It really does make sense, and it's encouraging. But we mustn't go too quickly. My grandma used the word mustn't frequently, especially with me. You mustn't go under the table in the corner there, and you mustn't do this, and you mustn't do that. And I just found out this week that I don't know how to spell the word mustn't. Do you? Well, we mustn't go too quickly or we'll miss the truth presented here, and we mustn't do that. So, our opening song was He Leadeth Me, O Blessed Thought. And the last line is, His faithful follower I would be, for by His hand He leadeth me. In Psalm 139, it says, You have searched me, Lord, you know me. You know what I'm thinking. That's kind of scary. I am never out of your sight. You are familiar with all of my ways. Guide me on the road to eternal life. That is probably the best statement of a personal God in the Old Testament. We need to follow the light. And Jesus specifically told us that He was the light of the world. John 1:4 says, In Him was life, and that light was the light of mankind. The light shines in darkness. And as we all know, this world is a dark and evil place. Thy word is a light unto my feet and a lamp unto my path. We are shown the way, but remember, the world is dark. I don't know for sure anymore. Has everybody heard the little rhyme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Has anybody not heard that one? Good. Some things keep going on and on. Well, one of the rarely published last stanzas of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star says, As your bright and tiny sparks lights the traveler in the dark. It's kind of neat. I like it. Well, I learn better from real examples, especially if I'm involved in the example. And so here's one. When I was a boy, about 6 years old, Dad decided to take us to the Lucas County Fair. Actually, we went every year. And it was a big fair. 25 years later, when I moved here to South Dakota, I discovered that the Toledo area, Lucas County, had the same population as South Dakota. It had the same number of dentists as South Dakota. So the fair was really big. It was like the state fair. Well, Dad especially liked the animals, the sheep and the bulls and the enormous pigs. They had all kinds of animals and quilts and pies, but mostly I liked the pigs. There was food and cotton candy and rides that I was also interested in. Well, we'd been there a long time that day. And sometimes my sister Bonnie and I would get bored. Ever heard that word? Dad kept reminding me, Jimmy, stay close. Well, the combination of being curious and getting tired got the best of me, and I wandered off. At first I was okay, and I just looked at different things. But then I tried to find Bonnie, my sister. And then I tried to find Mom and Dad, and I didn't see them. So I started running back to where I had been, and I couldn't find them. I started to realize that I was lost, and I got scared. Finally, a kind lady asked me if I was lost. I said I was, and I was crying. She took my hand and told me how to find my family. She just said, "Follow me." We went to a special place, and a man spoke into a microphone, and I heard him say that a little red-headed boy couldn't find his family and where I could be found. Well, I was alone and I was lost, but in a short time, I saw Daddy coming to rescue me. Boy, was I glad to see him. And he wasn't mad. He thanked the people for finding me, and we walked off together. He didn't say a word, which is normal for Dad. He held my hand lovingly, and when we got back to my mom and sister, he let go of my hand and he said, "Stay close." Well, now I know that he was probably more relieved than I was. But I also learned on that day that I had my part to do in the following. This is the way, walk in it. But I had my part to do. I had to follow. I've noticed that God asks us to follow him. His faithful follower I would be. We have our part to do. We often go our own way, but he leadeth me. So now let's fast forward about 30 years to the early 80s when my kids were about 7 or 8. We lived out at Camelot, just outside of town. We lived on 5 acres, and we couldn't even see our neighbors. Now it's so built up, you wouldn't know that, but we didn't have curtains because we didn't need them. I had a 3-wheel ATV that pulled a lawnmower that cut a swath 58 inches, about 5 feet. And sometimes the kids rode with me, and pretty soon they rode on the 3-wheeler everywhere. They wanted to drive by themselves. There were neighbors in the area, but it was easier to get there if they would get on the 3-wheeler. So they did. They had a lot of freedom. They grew up driving on gravel roads and no cell phones. Hadn't been invented yet. Well, I was scheduled to teach a 2-day class in Washington, D.C. And we decided to make it a short vacation. And since all of us here are from small places, going to a big city is very different from our landscape. On the first day, we headed out to see some of the sights at our nation's capital. And guess what? I instructed my kids to stay close. Things were going great as we approached the first intersection. And all of a sudden we heard a woman yelling, "Leave me alone, leave me alone." And there was a man wearing a suit and tie that was confronting her and yelling back at her. And in the confusion, the man made her let go of her sweatshirt, and hundreds of coins and watches and necklaces and bracelets splattered all over the sidewalk. The man kept hold of the sweatshirt lady, and very quickly the police were there. All the tourists were wide-eyed, and I think there was even a brief applause. The light changed, and then everybody went off on their own direction. Soon Stephanie and Kedrick were talking about what just happened. Did you see that guy make her drop all that stuff? I saw about 10 watches and a lot of other stuff. How did she hold it all in her sweatshirt? That really made a loud crash. The police sure got there fast. Well, you know what? I never had to tell either one of them to stay close the rest of the entire time we were there. They were constantly on the lookout. They were constantly on guard. And it made parenting much more enjoyable. We moved about like a small flock of birds. Man, we got on the metro and off the metro. Everywhere we went, we just went together. And that lasted till we got home. But it was good while it lasted. However, we are not always in control of life's circumstances. Have you noticed that? A good deal of the time, things happen that are beyond our control. And so let me skip forward again about 3 years to when I had to teach another class in Washington, D.C. We landed at Washington National Airport, proceeded to baggage claim, which was crowded and confusing. We stood at carousel number 3, which is where our luggage was to arrive, and we waited. We were there probably 20 minutes, looking for our suitcases, and all of a sudden, Kedrick said to me, Dad, some people are taking our luggage out the door over there." He recognized the suitcases, and by the time we got close to the exit, because he and I ran over there, the suitcases were being stuffed into a van and they drove off. That is not a good thing. They didn't take Stephanie's suitcase, but mine, Gail's, and Kedrick's were gone. What a mess. We went to lost luggage and filled out forms and were given more complete forms to fill out for each suitcase. And actually, in the end, a couple months later, 3 or 4, things worked out quite well. After all of our documentation, especially a few receipts we had for some of the clothing that was purchased before our trip, it resulted in us receiving several $1,000s. I was really surprised. But for that night, we had the clothes on our back and a couple carry-ons. Fortunately, my carry-on contained the 2 carousels of slides I needed to present my class and all the materials that were in there. So the next 2 days, I was busy teaching, and the rest of the family went shopping, which they had a good time. And they even bought me some clothes for the second day of my class. There was a huge mall that was right next to where we were staying. So I have a question. Did I choose to have our luggage stolen? No. They were professionals. They had a getaway van right there, and someone planned the heist. No one in our family caused this to happen. What happened was beyond our control. And isn't that the way life seems too often? Beyond our control. The point of this lost luggage illustration is that we are not in control. We may think we are, but we are not. He leadeth me, but sometimes the days are dark and dreary. And I'm talking about really dark and really dreary. Where you go, Lord, I will follow. Where I am, Lord, you are there. Deliver me. Well, every year has different seasons, and you don't have to be told that it's winter right now. Every year has difficult seasons, and each of our lives has difficult seasons. What season of life do you now reside in? Age-wise, for me, it's the winter season, no matter how you look at it. Even if I'd lived to be 100, the springtime of my first 25 years is past. The summer of the next 25 years is over. The autumn of the following 25 years is a memory. And surprise, I'm in the last season, winter. As the song says, I've looked at life from all sides now, and I know, I am absolutely certain that the Lord I recognized as a child has been with me all along. He was there when I didn't care. He has always been there whether I was paying attention or not. And he's been very patient with me. He has blessed me more than I could have ever hoped for or deserved. At times I have wanted desperately to know exactly what God wanted me to do, such as which career to take, which bill to pay first, what vehicle I should get. What should I do? And that's when I realized that God gives us freedom of choice. If we seek to put his ways before our own, that usually means dropping choices that are plainly wrong or would not please him. Even when the way goes through a dark and scary valley, like the psalmist said in Psalms 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. Well, sometimes it's the valley of temptation. The valley that Alex said that the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted. And you know what I mean, because we've all been tempted. We've all been there many times. And Jesus was there too. He was taken there by the Spirit for a test, right into the jaws of the wilderness of temptation. If there's one thing that we all know plenty about from our own experience, it would be temptation. But let's be objective and let's look up the word tempt in the dictionary. Quote, to make or try to make a person do something. Another explanation of temptation is to appeal strongly to or to attract. I was surprised that one word away from the word tempt is the word tempter with a capital T. The definition was short. It said, the devil, Satan. And this is this is not a religious dictionary. This is just a dictionary. The archaic use of the word tempt is to test. God, in fact, they use this illustration. God tested Abraham by asking him to sacrifice his son. A temptation is a test, the act of choosing to or not to do something. You can either do a thing or not do a thing. If you're taking a true and false test, you pick true or false, and if you pick nothing, you miss the question anyhow. I repeat, temptation is a choice. So now let's consider what temptation is not. Temptation is not torture. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted or tested beyond that which you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way of escape that you will be able to bear it or withstand it." It does not say that God will allow you to be tortured or grieved beyond what you are able. It says tempted, not tortured. Temptation for sure is not easy, but it is a test of choice. The text would read to me better, "Do not lead us to a place where we will be tempted or tested beyond which we are able to choose your leading." Jesus was tortured after he was arrested. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he was tested. He was tempted, and he said, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours be done." Jesus was victorious because he went through with the plan of salvation for you and me. And you will be victorious when you choose to follow the light. You may choose right, you may choose wrong. Your temptations will be yours, not mine, because my temptations are not the same as yours. We all have our weaknesses, and we all have our particular ways of sinning. That which tempts you may be of no interest to me, and vice versa. Our prayer should be, "Lead us, Lord, and keep us from wandering and show us the way home." So now, what is another way to say "not into"? Lead us not into. What's another way of saying that? How about lead us away from temptation? Is "not into" the same as away from? And I like that better. Lead us away from temptation. He knows you, he knows what we're thinking, and he's familiar with all our ways. We ask that the Lord guide us on the road to eternal life. And when we're tempted, give us the courage to be the person our Creator made us to be. Lead us away from temptation.